Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are going to do some special selections today, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Lauren, Austin Wintory's Cernos. So that's what we're going to be checking out today. This comes off of the soundtrack for The Pathless, which I haven't had a chance to play yet, but I have heard this soundtrack before. I picked it up a while ago. I'm a huge fan of Austin Wintory. The dude is just genius all over the place. And so I tend to pick up the soundtracks before I pick up the games. And I have heard Cernos before. It's been quite some time, although I'm sure once I hear a couple notes it'll jog my memory. What's really cool about this is the video is called As Noted, where we actually have the sheet music or the notation for the music on the screen as well. Now, I understand this is going to be super tiny. If you could see it, good for you. I wager most people, especially those on mobile, won't be able to see the sheet music itself. As usual, I link the video in the description. Go ahead and check that out. Give them the view, not me. Austin certainly deserves it. So, let's dive into this and see what Austin Wintory is doing with Cernos. We have glassware? What is that? Glass marimba? That sounds cool. Washboard. Wheelie sticks? Oh, we got a taiko drum. Oh, I remember this rhythm. There's the marimba. That sounds crisp. Glass marimba is very cool. Bazuki, Kim, Sarod, Ode. Oh, we got some strings coming in. Oh, that, yeah. Nice zither. It's difficult to follow this because the lines change with the number of instruments. Oh dang, there's information at the top too. This is a short transition phase, a new loop here marking phase 2 of the chase. This is a lot to take in on a first listen. The triplet vibe here to keep the intensity going, create this galloping feeling. The percussion is awesome. I am noticing a lot of string and percussion though. We had some horns at the beginning of the track, but that was it. What is a nickel harpa? There's a lot of instruments here, I gotta look up. Metals? Okay. Bringing back the main theme. Oh, with a little variation. The atonal French horn ensemble is a major part of the Pathless music, always save for climax. Yeah, very cool little Hocket idea there. Well, not really a Hocket, more of just a interlinked counterpoint, call and response. Oh, some throat singing, very cool. This triplet feel continuing to pervade through the track. Really interesting to see the horns always trading off. So this is now Cernos defeated and the post-battle cutscene. The release of this tension. Also, very minimal percussion. Strings are dominating now with the glassware. I can hear a shimmer off to the side. I'm real curious what glassware means though. Is that what that is? Is it like, running your finger over wine glasses? Beautiful. Oh snap, do you see that in the corner? It might be too small. Did some as noted episodes for Stray Gods. I just found out about that game not too long ago, and it's a musical in video game with like they recorded different um songs or styles for the songs depending on like the paths you chose to go through the game, and like there's different lyrics to many of the sections, and it just seems like this ridiculous undertaking, and I have to play it. And yeah, then I also found out it was composed by Austin Winter, and I was like, yep, that's definitely on my list. All right. So, this was a lot to take in on just one listen. But I really I enjoyed the information of it. I don't know how deep of an analysis this is going to be because I'll be honest, this was a more of a casual listen to me for a second. I forgot I had the camera on me and I was supposed to be, reacting and stuff like that. Um, but there are some neat things I want to bring up because, the thing with soundtrack music is that the intention of it, I think, is rather clear based on the context. This is a boss fight music. As such, it starts with uh, a sort of base level intensity. The intensity ramps up over time, and eventually you defeat the boss, and we have the post fight release of tension. Much of the track, aside from the final, like, I don't know, 20, 30 bars, which are for the post fight release, are about controlling the tension, the subtle gain and release, so that it doesn't feel like constant tension, which can be draining and also boring. Linearity is not something most people find fascinating. It's about the slow rise, the peaks and valleys of the rising action. We talk about this all the time. Basic storytelling, linguistic storytelling. We're talking about, film, movies, books. Um, you do want to ramp up the intensity over time until you hit your climax, and then you do your denouement and finish the story out. But you don't just rise up entirely. You have the three act structure. You hit one peak, bring it down a little, hit a new peak, you bring it down a little again, but this time you're not going to sink as far, and then you hit your highest peak, and then you wrap the track, or sorry, you wrap the story up. Music is no different. And a lot of this, as I mentioned, is about building up to that finale, but having these peaks and valleys within there as well. So, as far as what is the music doing on its own, there's your analysis right there. It's controlling tension, creating these peaks of tension, some valleys with a little bit of release, all of it in service of reaching the end. And it's about keeping this contrast, and it's very loop based as well. As I mentioned, there's a quite a bit of notes presented on this as noted video that showcase this is where the loop would repeat if you stick with this section, but if you move on to the next phase of the fight, we will move on to this. And so we get a very linear version of this song here that we probably wouldn't hear in the game, as certain phases would take longer or shorter than others, and the loops would be different, the phrasings would be different, the transition times would be different. This is more of one pass through each section, it sort of feels like. Um, so there's always that element too about, and it's one of those crazy things, man. It's one of the things I think would keep me out of video game music entirely is just how difficult I think it is to write, since it's not a controlled environment. And so anytime that I get a little peek on the other side of the curtain uh, into video game writing with stuff like this. Or one of the cool things, I don't want to get on a tangent right here, but this is really cool. In like Majora's Mask, they recorded each song like 5 times depending on where you were at, and they used crossfades. And like even moving from one person to another person, if the two people in the town have like different instruments tied to them, it would crossfade the melody between the two of them, so the music was reactive to the player. And it's like, this is magic to me. I don't want anything to do with it. It sounds entirely too complex. I prefer a more controlled environment. I will craft the story I want, and you will listen to it at the pace that I prescribe. But it is entirely fascinating to me, this entire side of video game music writing, since you aren't in control of it, and you do have to sort of automate some of it and work around those limitations, and it does breed exceptionally creative ideas through that. Um, but yeah, like the song we heard here is probably not what you would hear if you played the game, unless the game's pacing was controlled quite a bit. Like a rhythm game. With all of that said, we kind of touched on what the song is doing. I want to focus on some of the things specific to this song that I think is really interesting. I mean, first of all, one thing we touched on, just kind of transitioning out of this topic of tension and release, is a heavy movement of triplets. They are all over the place in this track, especially once we get into it. It takes us a while. We do have a lot of eighth note runs at the beginning of the track, but it doesn't take long until we transition to, oh, it's about right here, about a minute and a half into the track, and we move into this triplet feel. And we stick with it for quite a while. And what's really cool is it isn't just triplets all the time, but everything is in groupings. So like a triplet is 3/8 notes, and 2/8 notes is going to be a quarter note. And so on the washboard, particularly, we have a lot of groupings of a quarter note and an eighth note in a triplet bracket. Let me see if I can pull this up in any way that is meaningful. 1 second. I'm gonna try to break something, I think. All right, let's see how this works. I feel like a weatherman, but everything's backwards. This is my right hand. So like right up here, you can see the groupings of a quarter note with an eighth note put into the bracket with the 3 over it, which as we can see down here, normally we would have groupings of 3/8 notes. And when they have the stick and then the stem after it, like right there, or when the stems are connected, like down here, that all means eighth notes. As I was talking about earlier, there's also these, which have the double stem, or sorry, the double lines connecting them. Those are eighth notes. They are half the length of an, sorry, those are 16th, half the length of an eighth note, and the eighth notes are half of the length of a quarter note. And since I believe all of this is in 4/4, yep, so the 4 on the top says that there's 4 beats per bar. A bar is just from here to there. That's a bar. So you can fit 4 quarter notes in there, as you can see right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This weathermanning thing, it's kind of coming a bit naturally to me. um, so when we get into, why did I bring up that? Oh, yeah. So yeah, so for doing eighth notes, being that they're half the length, you can put 8 of them in there instead of just 4. It's all math. Once you kind of figure out the length of things and how much space you have per bar, you can really easily count it all out. And of course, if you can have 8 eighth notes, you can have 16 16th notes, as they are half the length of an eighth note, a quarter of the length of a quarter note. All right, a little bit of notation, sheet music, reading 101 right there. So when we move to the triplet feel, though, we don't just have the triplets, which we certainly do. I mean, just all over. There's these triplet eighth notes, and it's what creates that galloping feeling throughout this entire thing, because we still sort of emphasize the first beat of each of those. So we get ba 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 ba, and it creates this grouping of 3 within all of our notes, or sorry, all of our bars. And it really is what creates that driving force. We have series of 16th notes, which are technically faster, if this would pull up. But they don't feel as intense. They don't feel as driving. They don't have as much motivation to them because they're more of a rigid feeling. When we bring in the asymmetricness of the triplet, we get this. It's a galloping thing. I don't know the science behind it. I don't know why triplets feel like galloping and fast 16ths don't. My guess, again, is symmetry. Once we introduce something asymmetric, it does something in our brains and we feel that. And of course, when the galloping comes in, we think of horses and we think of drive and movement. If anyone has any insight into why we do this, please let me know. But if I want to make something with a lot of momentum and driving and forwardness, you can certainly do it, syncopating up some 16th notes or 8th notes, but triplets are just guaranteed to work every time. And so once we really get into the full swing here, we move into a lot of these triplet ideas. And come on, man, why? Yeah, so we're in the triplets for a while. We're still in triplets. It takes us a long time. Actually, it takes us the whole song to get out of it, doesn't it? Oh yeah, phase two, we bring the horns back in. They're up top. We have horns 1 through 5 and horns 6 through 10. Well, as I thought was really interesting here was that they were placed on opposite sides, with 1 through 5 being on the left and 6 through 10 being on the right. That's not how they would typically be set up in an orchestra, which kind of makes me think or wonder if Austin envisioned this like a traditional orchestra and had everyone in front of him the way that they would normally be placed, or if he recorded this in a more modern way and just recorded everything individually and then placed them in the mix in the audio workstation more so than how they were recorded. I mean, if he did it the traditional way, he would have had to split the horn section up to either side of the orchestra, which would have been interesting. Um, yeah, see, I'm really curious. We come back to the triplets and we stick with this for quite some time. Oh, I missed that. What in the world? Yeah, look, right here. We got a groupings of 6 here. That's, what was I looking? I must have been looking at the horn line here. Yeah, because we were doing the back and forth on the horns. Just some really interesting rhythmic stuff going on that I completely missed. Like I said, information overload on this. And then, of course, once we hit this phase, the cutscene starts and we begin getting into the rhythms of the conversation or the direction of the cutscene itself. It has its own flow and rhythm to it based on what the director wanted to happen, assuming that control is taken away from the player. And that's why, despite the entire song being in 4/4, we end up in sections with 9/8 and 7/8 and 3 bars of 4/4 here. There we go. Which is just a 3 bar phrase is kind of weird. But if we add the 9 and the 7, that's like another bar. It's like another 2 bars of 4. I don't know. It's like it gets really. Here we got a 2/4 out of nowhere, but you're having to match the pacing of the cutscenes. It's kind of like scoring a film. If you're trying to score the specific movements, whether it's the movement of a character, camera movements, shifting of scenes. So I noticed that when we got into the end here, that there were quite a bit of metric changes going on, and that would be my guess, is trying to match the movements and particularities of the scene, because the entire track is very straightforward in 4/4. All right, so driving action, metric stuff. What else did I want? Oh, instrumentation. What are half of these instruments? I think that's what's really, I mean, right up top, we got a penny whistle. What is that? There's a really cool thing, bass viola da gamba. That's cool. Oh yeah, the nickel harp. The oud I know of. We checked that out recently in, was that Massive Scar era that used one? I don't know. That's a very cool string. Most of these are string instruments. The zither, I think the canoon is string. Um, just a lot of plucked strings all over the place, but they all have so many different timbres, and I love the layering of it. Man, let's group that right now. Um, we do have horns. They show up intermittently, as stated in one of the notes that was put in the top here. The French horns are used in very particular places, primarily for accent. They do stand out quite a bit in this instrumentation. I think they are the only woodwind instrument here, not woodwind, aerophone in the entire thing. There's quite a few instruments I don't know, so it's possible that there's some instrument present, but even just going off of timbre, everything here sounds plucked or struck. So percussion and strings is what I primarily hear, plus the Alash ensemble, which is a type of choir, I think. I have to look that one up, but the throat singing came from that group, I believe, or at least they were playing the same thing that the throat singing was. So that was cool. What else though? Oh yeah, layering. This is something that happens all over the place. This music looks very complex, right? But a lot of it is the same thing being played on multiple lines, and coming from different instruments. Many of the instruments, though, are plucked string. And so what ends up happening is that when you listen to the music, it doesn't feel or sound as chaotic as all of this looks like, right? And that's because your ear is typically hearing the combination of all the timbres playing the same thing. And so you end up only hearing like three or four ideas, which if you're a metalhead or a rocker, which a majority of the people watching this channel are, that's right on par. Three to four instruments is what a lot of that is made up of. In fact, when I think of more mainstream music, even outside of that, we think of pop music, country, even hip hop. Three to four instruments seems to be the status quo. So I think it's really interesting. I'd never made that conclusion, but I wonder if a lot of soundtrack music, especially modern soundtrack music, works within this framework. A foundation, maybe a harmony to the foundation, a rhythmic component, and then your lead. Even here, where we have leads that sort of jump around with the two horns, we can hear them together because they're the same timbre. We can kind of interpret them as a singular identity. Because, like, classical music is typically, especially when you look at Baroque, the more complex stuff, Renaissance lightened things up a little bit, tightened it up. It's all about like multiple moving ideas all the time. It is a lot to worry about, even just sonically. But here, it's complex on paper, but simple to be heard. And I think that's very cool. The more I think about it, like I'm thinking about his journey work, I'm thinking about, I kind of hate that I'm blanking out on his name. The dude who does all the soundtrack work for Supergiant games. I'm thinking about film soundtracks, even like John Williams, who still has a really big foot in traditional classical, still has that soundtrack feeling to his writing. And the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, there's only a couple of lines that are really prominent, especially in the major themes. Hmm. But yeah, so all of this from texture layering. There's a lot of sections where multiple instruments will play the same thing and all of their timbres will come together to create this really cool combination of sounds. And of course, sometimes they're harmonizing as well, and you're going to get that harmonic layering on top of the texture layering. Um, Percussion is also similar. Where is that one part? I mean, this kind of fits the bill too, but I think there's a section I wanted to look at more. I mean, yeah, okay. So we got toms, frame drum, taikos, washboard, wood blocks, pulley sticks, drumbeck, and metals. They're all generally doing similar things. The toms, the taiko drums, the wood blocks, the pulley sticks, and the metals are all doing the triplets with a quarter note followed by an eighth note idea. There are a couple instruments doing the inverse of this. That would be the frame drums, the dumbeck. That's it. They are doing a rest on the first hit and coming in on the end of one to do their attack. And then we have the washboard, and they're just kind of going crazy with these 16th notes in various groupings. They're creating a lot of energy underlying all of this. But what I'm saying is there's three ideas here. You know, all these notes. This is just a lot of stuff, but there's three main ideas, and one of them is particularly in opposition to another, particularly coming in on an offbeat where the others are coming in on a downbeat. But then they do line up on beats 2, 3, and 4. So it really is just that initial getting a little bit of syncopation at the beginning of the bar. Um, but there's so many sounds here. Each of the drums, each of the percussions have their own timbre. And it makes it feel very large, very wide, very extra, but in a way that just is exceptionally complementary to each other. It's not just like a bunch of random instruments. I can't imagine the process that went into choosing all of these instruments, especially since I don't know what some of them are. So, I mean, let's talk about that for a second. Right here at the bottom, we have one called Metals. What is that? I feel like I need to shoot Austin an email. What are metals? But also early on, actually right there, I know where it is. We got one right at the end. Up top, glassware 1 and 2. And the thing is just off to either side, you can hear the shimmering, and it's kind of like when you run your finger over like a wine glass and it resonates a tone based on, water and stuff, like a bunch of physics about sound waves and vibrations and stuff. I don't know how it all works. Um, is that what's going on here? What is glassware? um, I don't know, but I'm kind of intrigued by it. It's really cool because you don't actually hear it. It's very quiet, but it adds just the slightest bit of oomph, of extra texture to any of the times that they're present. And they're usually here they're isolated, but usually they are alongside other instruments. Like right here, they are generally playing the same thing as our glass marimba, which, dude, a glass marimba, when it came in solo-ish and I could really make out its timbre, sounds phenomenal. The marimba is already my favorite instrument as far as percussion goes. It just has this excellent tone to it. And to find out there's a glass variant of a marimba and it sounds as crisp as this makes me want to own one. I don't want to know what they cost. Please don't tell me in the comments. That's just going to break my heart. And then the Alash Ensemble, which again I think is a choir of sorts, though they primarily work with acoustic sounds and throat singing, is what I picked up out of it. I tried to follow along with what they were doing and match it to a sound, but the video was. I didn't realize this until the end, but there's about a half of a beat delay between the video and the audio. Um, and so I was always sort of looking at the wrong the wrong thing going on. And it confused me for the first couple of minutes until I figured it out and had to mentally adjust that latency. But yeah, it's a choir. It's all vocal work from what I could hear, and I thought that was very cool too. I think that's going to about wrap this up. I don't know, Lauren, if this is the kind of video you wanted out of this. Uh, the bit of a different take on it. But I didn't know about these as noted videos, and now I do, so I greatly appreciate that. Um, and there's a lot of instruments here that I now need to educate myself on because they sound awesome. Like some of them I knew, the Ode, the taiko drums. I know what a washboard is, but I never would have thought to have heard it in this type of folk music. So I mean that's kind of cool. And the glass marimba made my day. It's gonna destroy me when because I'm not gonna be able to not look at the price of it. I have to look it up, and I'll probably find out I'll never be able to own one. I gotta find a VST for it or something. So I guess those are my thoughts, kind of my observations, I suppose we should call it this time around about Cernos, by Austin Wintory from the Pathless soundtrack. I did see a little bit of the footage behind the music, and it looks like it's a third-person action-y kind of game. And that looked kind of fun. I gotta find some trailer and see what this is about. Enjoyed a lot about this. Also, if you enjoyed this track, the rest of the soundtrack is just as phenomenal. Go buy it. Austin has a Bandcamp page and he sells all of his soundtrack work. He also did the stuff for Abzu and Journey, which are like two phenomenal soundtracks. Even if you don't play video games, even if you don't know what those games are, go check those soundtracks out. Um, they will move you. Austin is one of my favorite game composers, for good reason. Very good reason. Just a phenomenal dude. Yeah, those are. Let's wrap this up. Those are my thoughts on Cernos. Let me know yours. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, if anything stood out to you, if there's anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on, or just start conversation about. Like I said, this is less of an analysis and more of just me gushing about some of the details I picked up in the sheet music. So, uh, I guess conversation might be a bit more for that. I'm down to talk about Austin's work 24/7. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree, which takes you to this menu. In there, you can find my music. It's kind of feels weird to plug my music after that because it is not going to be as good. Links to the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and a bunch of other stuff. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this one. We do have another special selection coming up today. It's already out if you're watching this live. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.